Hi, everybody. A lot of people signed up for this, so I'm gonna wait maybe a minute. That should be enough time, I think, before we get started. I'm just gonna get some stuff done in the background while I wait. And I'm just gonna wait till the amount of attendees that are joining kind of um, trickles off. Okay, I know it's 1:01, but maybe like 30 more seconds just because there's still some people joining. Okay, actually, that seems like the right amount. Okay, cool. All right, so let's just get into it then. Hi, everybody. If you don't already know me, my name is Sophie, and I'm part of the Umapped customer success team based in Toronto. Thanks again for taking the time to join us for today's Beyond the Basics webinar. This is probably not going to be longer than an hour, so if anyone has to leave a little bit early, I'll still be sending out a recording of this just like usual, so you'll get a recording even if you can't stay for that Q&A portion, or if you have to bow out a little bit earlier than it actually, before the webinar is even over, that's totally fine. Everybody here is going to get a copy of this, plus some additional resources that I think might be helpful. So before I do get into the actual webinar, like always, I do want to remind everyone that this particular webinar series, the Beyond the Basics series, is designed for users who have already been on a trial or an actual account and are at least somewhat familiar with building trips in the trip publisher, because I'm going to be not really getting into details about any basic trip building stuff. So I'm going to gloss over a lot of things that I want to just assume everybody has a base level of knowledge about. For any new users, so if you're joining today, but you're not really that familiar with the trip publisher, maybe you just started your trial or something like that, I would instead suggest joining the Introduction to Umapped webinar, which is hosted on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can register for one of our upcoming intro webinars by going to umapped.com, clicking on the webinars button, and it's right under here, like the first webinar sign up under webinars. You can also sign up for a one-on-one meeting if you have specific questions while you're still getting to know the platform, because this is a good way that you can actually talk to somebody in the customer success team and ask questions that might be a little bit difficult to find on our support portal. So that's also another alternative. And if the time for the Introduction to Umapped webinar doesn't work, if you go to our support portal, which is support.umapped.com, and scroll to the bottom under resources, you'll notice there's a section for all of our webinars. So you can watch a recording of the intro webinar here. You can watch a recording of any of the past webinars that we've done. They're all going to be laid out here depending on like the series, or if it was a more advanced boot camp or something like that, it'll all be laid out here. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda. So during today's webinar, we're going to be going over all of the features and functionalities that help agents create and send off proposals in the trip publisher. So we'll be looking at a bunch of different components of the trip publisher that can be used towards creating proposals, such as creating and adding pricing tables or your company's terms and conditions, adding destination content to entice your travelers, using the messenger feature to chat with clients while they're still in the dreaming and planning stages. So we'll go into a little bit of how you can actually utilize the messenger even prior to having the trip be confirmed. And we'll also look at the end how to share a template. So not only can you share it with clients that you're currently working with, but also you can use it to showcase your skills to future clients. So it's going to be kind of like a hodgepodge of different tools within the trip publisher. We're not going to be looking at like anything new. So we're not going to look at any new proposals feature. I just want to make that clear off the bat. These are a lot of different tools that can be used to create proposals that you might not have already been aware of. Okay. So in this webinar, we'll be looking at a mix of features that involve both trips and templates, just so you can get a better idea of when to create a trip and when to use a template, because sometimes I know someone might use a trip when it might be more to their advantage to use a template and vice versa. All right, so with that, let's get started. I'm just going to go to my trip publisher account. And rather than building a trip together like we typically do during these webinars, I'm going to use a trip that I've already built. And we're going to examine this trip that I've already built and look at some of the things that I've leveraged in the existing trip building functionality, and we'll be adding to this. So we'll be adding a couple of additional segments that will really enhance and elevate this proposal. So you can see that I already have something set up called Sample Proposal to New Orleans. And you can see all of the different segments I have here. So I've got a flight segment, I've got some destination content already, but I'll be adding to this. I also have a number of hotels that are all on the same day, same time. And these are different options that I'm going to be presenting to my clients. So you can see one of them is the Courtyard by Marriott New Orleans, the Renaissance, the Hyatt Centric French Quarter. So here what I'm trying to do is present a couple of different options to my clients. And if I click on View Details, you'll also note that within each of these different hotel segments, I have not only the room information laid out so they know what would be in store here, but I also have all of the pricing set up in advance. And this is all going to be visible within the client experience. So even though right now this isn't a confirmed booking, I added this from one of my vendor profiles, which if you're familiar with a vendor profile, you'll know what that means. If not, I would also urge you to go watch one of our old webinars on creating vendors and what that even means. But you can see here, I didn't pull any of these different hotels in from a GDS or from one of my booking platforms. I really just created them within the trip itself, added the pricing info, added the room information so that my client can kind of get an idea of what options are available to them. And I also added a cancellation policy, of course. And you'll notice that I also did this for the flight segments within my trip. I open this up, you can see I added pricing here, I added the cancellation policy, and I also added some additional details. And I just added these all myself. That's why there's no passenger information right yet. It's just going to be things that I think they'd want to have an idea of before saying yes or no to any of these different options. So I'm just going to scroll through the other things that I've added as well. So same thing, I also have a couple of restaurant and activity recommendations. If you click on View Details for any of these, you'll see I added some details right down here and added some photos because I created a vendor for this particular activity just to give them something to look at. And same thing with this guy. And then my last air segment here. Okay. You'll notice, by the way, that for activity segments, there's not really a, whatchamacallit? Oh yeah, it has the pricing. So you'll notice that, by the way, when you're adding pricing, like I'll do this activity, for instance, there's an ability to add pricing and also an ability to add a rate. So you'll notice that if I click on pricing, there's going to be different fields that I can fill out versus if I select rate, which gives me, the type of rate itself. So whether this is a refundable or non-refundable, weekly, daily, blah, 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 blah. I have the ability to add a little description as well as the rate price. And you can add both of these. So when you're, first proposing this trip to a client, you can include pricing if you'd like, and a rate, or vice versa, whatever you prefer to do. Okay. And if you do have several different options for a client, such as I do with these different hotels, I would recommend adding a note segment that can kind of summarize the information for clients to allow them to review everything at a glance. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a page from the library, from destination content. So I'm going to come to destination content, and I'm going to go to add from library. And I already have a page set up in my library where I've created a little template for multiple accommodation options with pricing. So I'm going to look up that particular page called Accommodation Options and Pricing. And I'm going to copy it into my trip. Automatically, of course, your page is always going to go up to the very top. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click on View Details, select the edit, and I'm going to link this to one of my trip segments. So I'm going to actually link it to the last accommodation segment, and then just click Save. Now it's just going to follow that those hotels sequentially. So it'll be the last thing that appears after those three different options. And from here, even though this is a template that I have in one of my my documents in my library, I can go ahead and now add information to this. So I'm going to click on View Details, and I'm going to edit the contents of this page right here. And of course, later we'll look at how to create one of these of your own, so you can have these templates already made. But now I can scroll. This is a really cool part about having the right drawer while you have your actual trip in the middle. I can actually still scroll through stuff. So I can come here to my first option and put Courtyard by Marriott. I'm not even going to put the whole name, I'm just going to abbreviate it. Then I can put in the location if I'd like, so Naperville Street. Room type, I think for this one it was, let me just save this really quickly. This room type was the king room with sofa bed. So let's just take that, come here, put in the room type. And then I also have a column for policy and price as well. So I can fill these out for every single one of my options that I've provided. So I'll do like Renaissance, Marquette, and Hyatt, Centric, French Quarter. I'm not going to fill out all of the information just because you get the idea. There's an option for a location because I added that previously in my template, a room type, policy, price, all that kind of stuff. I even have the option here to add photos for all of the different options in the note so that they can scroll through those three different options while they're looking at the summary at this level. But having a template kind of laid out like this, following all three options, allows all of the information to get condensed into something that they can look at and compare all of the prices or compare the different room types across what the prices are at a glance. I said that a couple of times, so I hated saying it again, but essentially, rather than having all of the information laid out in one segment, another one with all of the information laid out in a segment, this just simplifies all of the information and takes just what's really necessary for your clients to look at, rather than having to also look at the checkout and check-in details, the address information, the contact stuff, which is really helpful. It's nice to have all of this information in the vendor profile, but this is the condensed version that they would want to see before going off. And again, you can add links if you'd like to all of the different websites for these different hotels if you'd like. Videos, if you have any videos, any photos, or even any files if you have a brochure on one of these different accommodations, or just something you've sketched up yourself. If you use Canva and you had a way to compare all of these different things in Canva, you could add that as well. So having these kind of templates set out in advance really can help you narrow down the focus for your clients when they're still in that dreaming and proposal stage. And I'll show you how to make these of your own, so you can choose which information you'd like to omit or like to show or whatever. Some of you might not care to show the location because it's kind of irrelevant, but might want to dedicate more space to amenities or something of that nature. You'll notice, by the way, that right now I'm creating a trip rather than a template. And that's because I'm putting everything in the trip because later on I want to show you how you can use the messenger feature. And currently the messenger feature is only a component within the actual, within trips, not templates. So this is me. The trip is going to be with me and maybe a client that I've already been speaking to who's booked with me in the past, or you know, just someone that I know I'd like to utilize this messenger function with, so that they can give me specific details of what they liked and what they didn't like on each individual segment, which is one of the cool things about the messenger. I know a lot of people tend to use the messenger during the experience of the trip while their clients are actually on the trip, but the messenger feature can be used way in advance. So we'll get to that in a little bit as well. Okay, so now that I've shown you kind of like how to lay out maybe multiple options for a hotel, you know, such as if you have 3 different hotels, we'll also go in briefly about how to show different options for rooms for a single hotel. Because I know some people might, you know, not want to display 3 completely different hotels, but might prefer to have one version of a hotel where they're in maybe a deluxe suite, and one version of the same hotel where they're in just a regular suite. So to do something like that, after I've initially put in the you know, the first iteration of that hotel, you know, for instance, we'll take the Courtyard by Marriott, where in this instance, the room that I'm going to be displaying is the king room with sofa bed. But there's another room in the same hotel that I'd like to also show that's a slightly different price. So what I'm going to do is, you'll notice that there's this copy icon in the right drawer for this hotel. I'm going to click on the copy, and I'm going to leave the check-in and checkout dates exactly the same because the information about that hasn't changed at all. I'm even going to leave the details the same for now because these are going to be the same between the 2 options. And I'm going to click on duplicate. So now it's going to make an exact copy of this first hotel here. So I'm just going to close the right drawer. And now we're going to come to the copy that I just made, and we're going to click on View Details. And I'm just going to edit the information in the room and the pricing. So in this second copy, I'm going to put in deluxe suite. You can add some different amenities if it comes with different amenities, like one guest pass to the spa, you know, kitchenette, whatever, something like that. And then we'll update it. And I'm also going to update the pricing because this is a different room, so there's a different price. So we'll say 2,200. The taxes, let's say, I'm not good at math, so I'm just going to do $15 less. I know that the math on that is totally wrong. I'm so sorry. And then we're going to do 1,530. And then we're going to update this. And by the way, the room didn't disappear. I just have to expand it again. So if you ever see that happen like this, don't worry, it didn't get deleted. You just have to click on room to expand it again. You could also, of course, add a separate room. That's always an option as well. The only reason I made a copy of the exact same profile is because I can't make a second pricing. So if you wanted to display 2 different room options with the correct pricing for each of those rooms, then I would suggest making, you know, you have your first copy where it says king's room with sofa bed and the total price is $2,474. But my second copy is an entirely separate room with an entirely separate pricing. Of course, if maybe the 2 rooms were the exact same pricing, but you know, just had different amenities or different names or whatever, you could always just keep the one original segment and just add a second room, because you can always do that. So we'll call this one, what was the first one? It was king room with sofa bed. We'll call this king room without sofa bed. So just king room, original, something like that. And we'll update this. So you can see now I have 2 different rooms, and those are both going to be visible in my client's copy. but because I only have the option to have one pricing per segment, it's going to look as though both of these rooms are the same price. And that could be totally fine. Or if you have multiple clients that are going on this trip, you can display the 2 different rooms and the pricing overall for both of those rooms, whatever you'd like to do. It's entirely up to you how you want to frame this. I just want to give you a good idea of what's available and what's not available. And one of the things that's not available is displaying 2 different kinds of pricing in a single segment. So I'm just going to remove this second room because I just want to keep the first original one. But you can see that's why I created the second profile here, because now if my clients were going to receive this in their email and they were scrolling down the web view, they could see everything outlined in this first copy and what was associated with it, like the amenities and the pricing in the room and all that stuff. And then they can come to the second one here and see what's involved in this one. There's a couple different ways that you can frame it. All right, so now that I've kind of looked at stuff within the actual trip itself, I want to take a brief break and then go to my library so we can look at some of those templated, accommodation options and pricing pages that I made and a couple others as well, and also how you can make them yourself. So let's go to library and we're going to go to my documents. And in case this is kind of new for you, by the way, the document library is a shared library between everyone in your company, and it can be used to store, custom and curated content, like destination content. You'll see a lot of these here are mainly destination content, agency information, such as this document here, any important PDFs or doc files that you wanted to save, because you can save docs within the actual library, as well as templated notes, which I'm going to show you now. So we're going to open a document I already created called Proposal Templated Notes, just to show you some examples of other pages and templated notes that were created to compare different options for clients. So this is where I pulled that accommodation options and pricing page from earlier, but I also have one for activities. I have one for flights if there's multiple different flights. And I also created something called a payment schedule and policy. And this can be used to kind of like break down the payment structure for your clients if you wanted to include this at the very top of their trip, just so that they're aware of it beforehand. I've already laid out some of my pricing here. I didn't put everything because things might change depending on the actual pricing for that trip. But each of these were quite easy to make because when you create a page, so I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new page. And we're going to call this page Tour Options plus Pricing. Within the page itself, because it's a free text field, you have the ability to create lists if you want, so ordered or unordered lists. And you also have the ability to make little tables, which is what I have behind over here. So I'm going to click on Tables. By default, it's going to be 3 and 2, but let's say I want to have it be 4 rows and 4 columns. And you have other options as well because these are all table properties. You can always change these later on, but I'm just gonna have it be 4 to start off with. So we're gonna do my usual option 1, option 2, option 3, and then we'll say this first column is tour name. We'll say this is location, and then pricing. And you could add whatever else you'd like to tables like this. It can be the tour name, the location, like where the tour is actually going to be held. You could also include details about the tour if you'd like. And, I can make any edits to this just by clicking, like right-clicking on any cell. And I can edit the table properties. So I can actually maybe like add a couple headers if I want. So let's add the header. Changes the way it looks a little bit. I can change the border size, the alignment, cell spacing, any of that kind of stuff. I can also insert another cell, or I can add another row if I'd like. So let's add another row. Oh, not row. It would be column. we have another column here where we can add maybe description as an option. If you just wanted to give a little description, or maybe the main contact name, that might be good. Anything you'd like. And this is just a really nice way of laying out all of the information, like I said earlier, in a condensed way, so that, you know, maybe the original segment for the tour has a really nice description of what is involved. Maybe the itinerary is actually in the description that you're providing and all that stuff. But they can come to this page and see at a glance, okay, tour X is going to cost $50 USD versus tour Y is going to cost $65 in USD. And they can kind of get an idea of, like, maybe one of them is more expensive than the other, but they really value one of the locations a lot more than the other, or the activity itself. So like I said, having these templates set up in advance means that not only you can come back and grab these whenever you'd like, just like I did with the accommodations options and pricing. I'm going to save this for future use. But it also means that other people in your company can come and grab this. Oh, that came out a little bit weird. I'll fix that later. It also means that other people in your company can come and grab any of these different pre-made templates, because the original template is going to stay safe and secure in your library. And when you add something like this activity options and pricing to your trip, it's making a copy of what's ever in your library, so you can make your own edits in the trip and they can look however you'd like. But because I have these set out in advance, anyone within my company can come here and just steal this and then add their own details. And then they can customize it however they'd like, because like I was showing you with the different cells, there's a lot of cool table properties you can do as well. You can like color in certain cells if you'd like. Like, let me just get a nice little hex code for peach. Show you what it looks like to color in a cell. Let's do background color is peach. See, you can color in cells like this, so you can display them differently if you'd like. I'll do another hex code for blue. Oh, if you're wondering how to do this, by the way, for any of these different cells, whether it's, you know, this guy right here under accommodation or the different options, just right click on them, cell properties, and then you can choose either the border color or the background color, depending on what you want to color. And then just find the hex code for whatever color you'd like. So every color is going to have its own hex code. And you're just going to take it, do the hashtag, whatever the hex code is, and then okay. And then there's your color. I'm just going to take away those colors though, because I don't want to have that saved for future use. But then there's a lot of things that you can also attach to pages, like any files if you wanted to. So if you wanted to have this laid out in like in Canva or something like that, you can have that laid out in Canva and attach it as a PDF or as a doc, whatever you'd like. Add videos, add other links, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let's also go to another doc I have called agency documents, to kind of look at some other things that I've saved that you potentially could save as well. So in agency documents, I have my terms and conditions. So these are the terms and conditions for my entire company. You'll see right here, as well as a link to a PDF version of this terms and conditions. I also have it saved as a file right here as a doc. So if you typically add terms and conditions to all of your trips, this is also a good way, if you wanted to include a link to a DocuSign, or a way that they can actually sign the terms and conditions. It will, of course, link out of the trip publisher, but it means that you can have everything kind of at once, so that they don't have to receive a separate email from you with the terms and conditions that they need to sign. So that's something that, like, you might want to consider as well, just attaching a link, or within the actual text itself, attaching a link to whatever you use to collect signatures. So whether it's a Google form or a DocuSign or something else, adding a link that will link out to one of those will really help you. Like, actually, maybe for instance, I'll do a quick, I have a, whatchamacallit, a little form here. We'll attach this little link to my Google form. We'll say this is a Google form. Please fill this out. Update. So now you can see I've attached a little link to a Google form here. And if I go back to one of my trips and add that page, so we're going to go to sample proposal to New Orleans, destination content, my terms and conditions, find the page, and then add it. Of course, it's going to add to the very top of my trip, but in this case, maybe that's something I want. You'll notice if I click view details, that link is still there. So now on my client's end, that's what they're going to see. So let's actually explore that now so you can see what exactly my clients are going to see by adding a traveler. And we're going to add, let's add my usual traveler. I just got to take her off so I can add her again. Sophie plus 12. Okay. So now we're just going to give that 2 seconds, go to my email so that we can pull up that copy. Okay, so first of all, by the way, of course, I've been sending this as a trip so that they can get this nice email copy because I'm currently theoretically in contact with this Sophie, and I want her to get this experience because I'm having a one-to-one conversation with her rather than trying to generate a lead or just showcasing my skills. I'm really want this to be more direct. That's why I created a trip rather than creating a template. And if they click on view your trip, and I'm just going to log out because I'm logged in as the admin right now, but I want to log in as my traveler. So we're going to do Sophie plus 12 at umapped.com, log in, and this is what it's going to look like. So we have those terms and conditions. This link out to, I'm pretty sure this is a PDF of some sort that I added earlier when I created this page, but it has the link out here so they can always link out. And if they click on more, you'll see there's the Google form. Please fill this out when I hover over it, as well as a docx copy of my agency terms and conditions. So they can go fill out the form if they'd like. So this is a cool way that you can add anything you usually use when you need your clients to sign stuff. That way it's all in the same trip email, the web view that they're going to access. You don't have to send a separate email. You can even have a page that's just dedicated to this is how you can go sign the terms and conditions. After you have your terms and conditions page, if you want to have this just be about the terms and conditions and then have a separate thing here saying, now go fill out the form or go fill out your contact information so we can get the ball rolling. But they can also come down and see everything else involved in this proposal. So on my flight, I can see not only those details that I added earlier, but also any pricing information, a cancellation policy, etc. I have all of my destination content that I added earlier that I can read and start getting excited about my trip. And then I have all of my hotel options. So I've got this one right here that has the king room with sofa bed laid out with all the pricing. And I also have the deluxe suite that has all of the, guest pass to the spa information, all my amenities, all my other pricing, because the pricing here is different than this one here. And I have also, oh yeah, those are 2 different photos. I got confused for a second. I also have my other hotel options, like the Renaissance, Père Marquette, and the Hyatt Centric French Quarter, with all of the corresponding room information, pricing information, cancellation policies, and then there we go, my accommodation and pricing info at a glance. So I can compare, if I had actually filled out all of this information, but I can compare not only the different types of hotels, but also the different rooms and pricing that can go along with them. You might also want to include a separate little tab for amenities so that they can see, not only the pricing and room at a glance, but also amenities, because that might trigger someone to choose something with a higher pricing, even if there's some cheaper options, just because the amenities are much better and more in line with what they're looking for. Okay. So I just wanted to give you an idea of what it looks like to your clients. And now let's say they wanted to leave their own remarks while they were scrolling through this initial impression, checking out all of the different hotels. That's where, for those of you that are on the Travel Pro plan who have access to the messenger will come in handy. Because, so first of all, the messenger feature, if you don't notice it when you're sending this to a client, it might be because you're on the individual plan, as the messenger feature is only available for those on the Travel Pro plan, just because it's one of those more interactive elements. But if you are, and your client, and you have it enabled, your clients can use this as an opportunity to leave you little notes on what they think of each different section. So for the Courtyard Marriott by Marriott New Orleans with the king room with sofa bed, they might choose to leave you a little note that says, "This, not interested in this one. Too far from my favorite restaurant," or something like that, whatever they'd like to say. And then they can just send it off to you. And of course, you're going to get these messages in the trip publisher itself, right there. So I can see all of these messages, especially helpful as I can see what they're associated with. So it's not like these messages are going to be all jumbled and I don't know where they're supposed to go, but I can actually see that this comment about not being interested is for the Courtyard by Marriott New Orleans. So I can see clearly which one it is. And they can leave the same thing on all the other options. So maybe instead of that, they really like the Renaissance Père Maquette. They can leave you a little comment that says, "This is the one." Are there other room options? And send it off to you. And then either from your email, because we do send these by email as well, in case you're not in the trip publisher when they've sent those comments, or you can open up the chat functionality within the trip publisher, see what they've said, and then quickly say something like, "Yep, there's also a deluxe suite for $100 more a night," and then send that off to them so that they can get their answer right away and decide if they want to proceed with something like that. Alternatively, you could also say, "Yes, they do. I just added another segment, another hotel to show you what that would look like." And send that off. And then if you'd like, just create another accommodation segment or duplicate the one that they really liked and change the hotel information, like the room number, the room type. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, but what this means is you can keep all of the actual deliberation during those dreaming and planning stages contained within the trip publisher. So they're not sending you private text messages or emails that you would have to go retrieve later. It's all done within the same interface. So it just keeps things much more clean, much more organized altogether. And of course, there's that overall trip chat as well. So if I go back to the main messenger, there's that overall trip chat where they can say, "Hey, just signed the terms and conditions you linked to. Let's do this." Or whatever they'd like to say. Any last questions they have, they can say if they didn't like it and they would like to see some modifications before proceeding with this as a trip rather than just as a proposal. So those are some of the different features and functionalities that you can kind of utilize when they're still deliberating on where they want to go. Okay, so let's go back to the trip publisher. And the last thing I want to talk about today is the concept of creating a template and sharing a template rather than a trip. Because throughout this entire webinar together, we've really expressly looked at trips and the functionality within trips that you can use for your clients. But there are also similar abilities within templates, and then some of their own kind of unique elements that aren't something you could do with trips. So let's go to Barcelona proposal. I think someone else put this together, but it's quite nice. So of course, if you're not already familiar with templates rather than trips, templates are very similar to trips in what you can add. So I can add different segments just like what I would with a trip to a template. The biggest difference is that templates will have a duration rather than specific dates. So you can see this says 12 days rather than the set date of March 5th to March 12th that you would see in something like a trip. So it gives you more of a like idea that's not cemented to a specific day or a specific time of the year or something like that. Uh, it'll be the same within the actual template itself. You'll see it'll say day 1, day 2, day 3, etc., rather than saying specific dates. And it'll say times of day, like evening or afternoon or morning, rather than specific times of day. Because again, templates are meant to be used more as models. So while you can absolutely use a template with a client you're currently talking to, someone who's used you in the past, or even just someone, that you wanted to share some trip ideas with, templates are still great for that because you can, use vendor information and display some photos. You can add details into the details section here. The couple of things you'll notice that are different between templates and trips are some of the more granular details. Like you'll notice that there's no space in this right drawer for pricing. And if I go to the hotel, there's no space for room information. And that's because this is meant as a very high level idea of a potential trip rather than having specific information, because this might be something you want to display to clients way prior to them giving you an idea of what kind of stuff they like, what they're looking for in a trip. These can be just those first few samples you shoot off when, they expressed a desire to go to Spain, but not exactly what they would like to do or where in Spain they'd like to go. This might be the option for Barcelona. So those more granular details you can still include, of course, in the details field here, but you want to think of using templates to display the idea of, going to La Sagrada Familia rather than the specific time of day they'd go, how much it would cost that particular day, because you don't know what time of the year they're going to go, because a template isn't meant to have specific dates. So these are more like idealized. So if I go to publish this template, I can share this with a client through the shareable link. So by clicking on the little actions icon and then copying my template link. And then I can open that up in another tab. And this is going to have all of those details. So it'll have my photos, it'll have any, Sagrada Familia had some details. So like I said, if you did want to include pricing, you could do that in details because those will display. It's just going to not be as granular as it would be with a trip. But a thing that you might also want to consider with templates rather than with trips is that because you're getting a shareable link with a template rather than that email copy that you get with a trip, templates are really useful if you want to display them on your website or put them on social media to show different examples of trips that you've designed and created before, because there's not going to be any specific information, so you can make sure that the real finishing touches you've added are going to be reserved for when you're actually sending a client off, rather than giving everything away right off the top so that nobody can copy your ideas, sort of thing. But also because anybody can access this from the link rather than having to be added as a traveler like you do with a trip. So one thing that I would usually exhort people to do with templates rather than with trips is, use these as an opportunity to showcase options on a social media on your website, as more of a lead generator rather than proposing ideas to your existing clients. You could still very well use templates for that, but because the functionality is a little bit different, you have that shareable link rather than having to add travelers, and things are a little bit more surface level, not really getting down into business about what this particular room costs or what are the amenities for this one, or what's the pricing, which might differ from time to time in the year. It's a good way for you to just give an idea of the kind of trips you send people off on without getting into details. Okay, so that is the last thing I think I wanted to cover today. So let's just go back to that agenda for a second to make sure that we have everything we wanted. Okay, so today, oh, by the way, for the whole shareable templates thing, we do have big plans for a more integrated proposals feature in the future, but that's something we're working on. So if you have any suggestions, or if you'd like to be involved with some of those, surveys that we might be giving out in a little while, just let me know that you might be interested in something like that, because I'm right now compiling a list of people that I'd like to reach out to for more in-depth information about enhancements or more proposal-like features. So just let me know if that'd be something anyone's interested in or has thoughts or suggestions about, because then I can get a bigger sample size of people I can ask. But okay, so today we've looked at some of the tools and functionality existing within the Trip Publisher that go towards creating proposals, such as us adding pricing tables, adding terms and conditions, destination content, using the messenger when you actually sent a trip off to travelers, and then some of the differences between sharing a template versus sharing a trip and why you might choose one over the other. So at this point, I'd like to move on to the live Q&A because it's been about 45 minutes and I know there's already some questions. I don't want to keep anybody too long. But like I said, again, if you're interested in something like that, just leave me your contact information, like your email or something like that, and I'll get back. I'll add you to the list and you might be hearing from me soon because it might be happening in the future that I do some surveys. But anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today, even if you can't stay for the Q&A portion or you don't have any questions. As always, I really appreciate everybody taking time into their day just to listen to me talk about stuff. So thanks so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And give me a second to just have a quick coffee break, and then I'll get to all the questions. Okay. All right. So, one of the questions was, if you are with a host agency, does everybody have access to your templates and information? That's a great question. So, the way that it's set up in our system is that host agencies are not part of the same company as the ICs or those, the child company or whatever you'd like to call it. So even if you have a host agency, they're not going to have any kind of access to your documents or your templates because this is restricted really to just people that are in with your immediate company. So if you're in, a company that only has like 2 different users, it's just going to be you 2 that are able to see documents. Same thing if you're in a company with maybe 40 users or something like that. All 40 of you will be able to see each other's documents. Templates are a little bit different because you have to deliberately choose to share them with your company. You'll see that there's different tabs here, one that's just my templates versus company templates. So if you and your admin if your admin hasn't made one of your templates available to the company, even other people within your company won't be able to see them. So they're a little bit different than documents, which are just available to everybody in the company off the bat. But if you have a host agency, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be able to see any of this information anyway, because they're not technically part of your company. They're part of an entirely separate company. It's just linked on our end so that we know they're your host agency, but they don't see any of your info. Okay. Another question was, can you publish your trip on your website for group trips that you're promoting? Okay, so there's actually 2 things I'd like to say here. So if you're promoting a trip or a group trip or something like that, that's where I would really come to templates, because these have that shareable link that you can put on your website for a group trip or an FIT or something like that people can look at beforehand to get an idea of the kind of trips that you sell. So just to reiterate how to do that, you're gonna, let's say Barcelona proposal. If it's still pending, you're gonna first wanna publish it because you'll only get that shareable link after it's been published. And then clicking on actions and copying the template link. Copy. And then you could post that link that I just copied anywhere. So if I have like LinkedIn, for example, I can make a post on LinkedIn or my website or my Twitter or something like that with that link that I just copied. I think I'll even like show you trip web view here, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want people to see that. So this is where I would suggest, make your group trip through a template and then share that link with other people. Alternatively, if you really wanted to make it as a trip, because trips have those little granular fine details that maybe you're interested in displaying to people, my recommendation would be, let's actually take a trip that I can use as an example. We'll do honeymoon to Greece. That's a good idea. So maybe let's say this was a trip you worked really hard on. It does have specific dates. That's why I usually tell people templates are a little more useful, because trips will have those dates. But if that doesn't bother you at all and you really don't care that they have dates, maybe you really only sell this trip for that week. I don't know, whatever you do. Or you just don't care. You just like the fact that this has those granular details like passenger pricing, cancellation, all that stuff. What I would recommend is, rather than adding a specific traveler email, add something super generic like traveler@email.com or, traveler@yourcompany.com. And then when you're showing this on your website, we actually did something similar in our support portal that I can show you as a reference. Sample trips. When you have it on your website, lay it out sort of like this. Like you can put some pictures, a preview of the trip or something like that. You can do like a view your trip here link, and then just let them know via, an asterisk or a little comment or something like that, that when they're logging in, use this email for full interactive access. So that's just kind of a roundabout way of showing a trip rather than a template, which usually would, you'd need to have that traveler's email address for them to enter into it, just because that's the initial security feature. But this is kind of a workaround where if you really like trips and you'd really prefer to use those rather than templates because of the granular details, you can still do so and just indicate it somewhere that they need a specific email to log in. All right, let's see, any other questions? Sergio asked, hi, how do you attach an e-ticket for a reservation? For example, if they reserved a monument and paid, and to get in, they have an e-ticket. So that's a great question. There's two different kinds of ways, and it's the same whether they're on a template or a trip. So I'm just going to use this trip as an example because it doesn't matter. You can either add it overall to the trip just by going to Documents and then going to File Attachments, and you can attach, let's say, I think on my desktop, I have something it's not really an e-ticket. I just call it an e-ticket for an example. But if your e-ticket's in the form of a PDF or a doc, you can add it that way. And then it's going to get added overall to the trip. You can also add it to a specific segment within a trip if you want your clients to, know for sure it's going to be on this activity at this time. So if I go back to my trip and let's say I have an e-ticket for, for this Mama Agata cooking class, maybe I have an e-ticket for that. I'm going to click on View Details, and then at the very bottom, there's an option to attach a file. So exactly the same way as I did before, I'm going to click Attach File. I'm going to upload a file, and then I'm going to add that e-ticket and attach it. The benefit of adding it this way is that you'll get that little paperclip indicator. So when they're looking at the client, the client view, they can see that there's something linked for Mama Agata rather than for the trip altogether. So this is a way to just make it really obvious that the e-ticket is on this activity and is meant for this activity. Now, of course, those two things that I added, all of the file attachments have to be in a PDF or a doc form. That's just the way that the upload a file option works. So if your e-ticket isn't another kind of electronic form, that's not a problem. What I would recommend in that case is creating a little note and then indicating that this is the e-ticket for Mama Agata cooking class. just do like, please click the link below to access the e-ticket. So if it's in another form, I don't know what other forms there are because I am dumb, but there are other forms, I'm sure. You could always add it as a link. So that way, you know, if the e-ticket is only accessible via a browser, you can add it that way, something like that. Okay, so let's see if there's any other questions. Evelyn asked, is there a way to see the itinerary at a glance on a list of what is scheduled for each day? Yep, so one option I would give you there, let me just go back to my proposal for New Orleans. One option I'd give you is to click on the blue plus icon and click on summary, because this is automatically going to generate a summary of everything that you have going on in the trip. You don't have to do any work yourself, it just automatically creates it for you. And then anytime you need to update this, so if like you added a couple more activities because you started this summary like way before the trip was ready, all you have to do to update it is come back to the blue plus button and click summary again. It's just going to refresh the one you made before. So this is kind of what the summary looks like, the generic one that we make. It just has whatever it is, like a restaurant reservation or an activity or something like that, and whatever the day is. It's not super, super fancy. You can always add stuff to this, of course. This is like totally editable. You can add more info if you'd like. The only thing I would caution is if you do make any edits to this, maybe don't make the edits until you're absolutely done, because anytime you generate the summary again, it's going to erase the edits you made before, just because it's making a brand new version for you rather than a copy. So if you're going to make any edits that make this a little bit prettier, I would just recommend you kind of wait till the trip or the proposal is more or less done, just to beautify this up a little bit more. But that's one way. You could always make your own summary, of course, just by using a regular note. You might want to change the form a little bit. I just think that using the summary function is pretty easy, because you can still make edits and changes to this. You can decide, you know, I would prefer to have all of these in point form or something like that. You know, you want to just change the way that it looks a tiny bit. And see, you can change the way it looks. You can highlight words, make them a different size, something like that. Blah, blah, blah. Actually, I don't think you can highlight them, but you can bold them. That's something you could do. Bold, italicize, add links, things like that. Add a table here if you'd like. The only reason I would suggest summary is because you at least can rely on the base amount of work. See, by the way, I just refreshed it and those details got erased. So don't make any changes until you're sure that it's good to go, because you're going to get super frustrated if you spent a lot of time making the summary really pretty just to have it get erased later on because you wanted to update one thing. Okay, so let's see if there's any more questions. There's quite a lot. I'm going to get to a lot of them if I can. If I can't get to any of these because I don't want to take up too much time, I will email all of you privately. Linda asked, can you share your proposal templated notes that you showed? Absolutely. So it's a lot easier for me to share trips. So if you'd like, actually, what I can do for everybody after this is I can make a trip with all of these different little templates that I created earlier and just share the trip with all of you, because I can actually share any of these different trips to all of you guys. So just let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I will send you, Linda, a copy of the all of those different little proposal note template things that I made. It's just going to be in a trip format because I don't think I can share documents, but I can share trips. So I'll just put them all on a trip and then you can transfer them to a document, which is super, super easy. Okay, let's see. There's still some more. How does the client see this summary? Good question. So Evelyn, I'm going to go back to my trip just to show you. Okay, so you got that summary right here. This is just the generic one that we made. So I'm just going to go to the web view so you can see it on the client side. It looks super basic for the client if you're just using the regular one, just like this. because it's really just basic information laid out in text form. So if you wanted to add more to this or change the way that it looks, you completely could. You know, if you could also, you know, have it laid out like this, but then also have a link, because you could see this is a note. So I can add a link or something else. So, you know, if you're somebody that likes to create stuff in Canva or really like make it like super pretty in Adobe or something like that, you could have this super, super basic summary just to have all of the information like very easy to tell apart, but then also attach whatever you've made in another program as a link, as a file, so that they can still access that and see the prettier version if they want to see that. So I'm just showing you all of the different options you have here. If you post the, okay, so someone else asked, if you post the itinerary on your website, is the messenger chat enabled? And if so, would the agency chat alerts? So that's one question. And two, would the conversation be available for all to view? That's a really good question. So if you do put, and in this case, when you said itinerary, I'm going to assume you meant trip, just because like I mentioned, I think at the top of this webinar, templates actually don't have the chat functionality. So you can't actually like leave messages on a template. So that's just not an option. But for trips, you can leave chats. So you're actually right when you say that if you had linked your trip on a website, kind of like I showed you before with the sample trip, like kind of like this, because everybody's accessing it from the same email, it's going to treat them all like they're the same user. So if you do have the trip functionality, the messenger enabled, everybody's going to be able to see all of the chat. You'll still get the chat notifications. So you could entirely do something like this if you just wanted people to be able to reach out to you by chat and say, hey, I really like this, or can you reach out to me? I really like this. But because everybody's going to be considered the same user because they're all logging in with the same email, everyone's going to be able to see the same chat. That's a good question. And it is good that actually we make that super clear. I'm not logged in as the traveler right now, so I'm just going to log back in as the traveler. Sophie plus 12. Anybody that logged in with Sophie plus 12 would see the exact same messages here. So it's a good thing, yeah, to mention right off the bat. Don't do something like this if you have the chat enabled, if you think that that might allow people to leave, you know, information that should be more confidential. That's where I would say like use a template rather than a trip. Or if you're going to use a trip, you can also disable the chat functionality. Al asked, modifications to templates and saving as a new template, turning template into trip. Okay, so what he's asking here is like how to make modifications to a template versus, and also how to put templates into a trip and vice versa. For this, I would actually recommend you go to our website and watch, let me just open this up. I would actually recommend you come to the August Bootcamp webinar series. And the last one here is about templates and tagging. This will give you all of the information you need about how to transfer a trip into a template and vice versa, and also how to edit templates, just because it's a pretty, it can be a pretty complicated subject in and of itself because it's a whole new feature, and I don't really have enough time to get into it today just because we're over the hour mark now. So I would really recommend coming here and looking at this one first. But yeah, you could definitely turn a trip into a template and vice versa. So if there is a really great trip you like that you want to save as a template to show on your website, you could always do that for sure. And then Claudia asked, how do you get the link to a trip? And what to do, what you explained before to enter with a generic email address. Oh yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So to get the link to a trip, what you're going to do is you're actually going to go to whatever the trip is, click on the preview icon, and click on Web View. And now you could use this link in itself, because if you send this link to somebody, they're going to be prompted to log in. So they're going to get this screen, 1 second, this screen when they originally get the link. So you can always send this to somebody, this one up here. And then, like I said earlier, as it's laid out in, 1 second, support.umapped.com, sample trips. If you want to reference something, the thing on our website, on our support portal, is called sample trips. That's where we've laid out some samples if you want to look at any of these, by the way. But you can like lay it out kind of like this, like sample this, maybe add a photo, a video, or something like that, and then embed the trip link like that, and then just let them know how to access it. Also ensure that you've added that sample traveler email beforehand, whatever you want to use, whether it's traveler at travelagency.com or something like that, or traveler at company.com. Just make sure you add it beforehand so they can actually access the trip. Okay, and last question is, will a recording of this be sent for us to, will a recording of this be sent out as well as template information? Yep, so I'll send out a recording of this webinar in like a couple of hours, and I'll also send information about where you can access all of our past webinars for anything to do with templates and other stuff like that as well. Okay, so I think that's all of the questions. Yes, and some people left me their emails about getting in touch about template and proposal and all that stuff, enhancements. So thanks so much. I will be getting in touch with you at some point. I'm not sure when the survey is going to be ready, but it will go out at some point. So thank you so much for that. And let's end this now since we're over the hour mark. Thanks. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and you'll hear from me soon. All right, take care. Bye, everyone.